Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. Indeed, it's an honor. Thank you for opening up your hearts and your minds to me and this show and these wonderful, wonderful guests that I bring to you every day. Well, let us talk about South Africa. Why is that important? We have been looking at South Africa once again because Elon Musk, quite frankly, has loomed large, but so is Peter Thiel. He's not from South Africa, but he is from Southern Africa, and they have a whole cadre of very powerful people with them wielding great authority over our policies in the United States, and we need to talk about that. Now they're bringing many South Africans into the United States. Charlize Theron. Many don't know that this great actress is South African. And that she's also had a troubled background, but she was admitted to the United States and she's gone on to become a global superstar of film. But now the American government is pushing back against the South African government because they're doing what President Robert Mugabe did at the outset of sovereignty in Zimbabwe. He made as a condition of their sovereignty, wait a minute, we want our land back. With the South Africans, that was set out a little bit further. And so some people have wondered what would be the impact. Well, the impact is this. We do have a tremendously wide disparity between the haves and the have-nots. The have-nots are still black in South Africa, and the haves are overwhelmingly white. And yet, the whites who are being asked to turn the land that they took unrightfully from black South Africans, when asked to, required to bring it back, it has become a source of contention. Now it is on our shores. Indeed, President Trump, at the behest of Elon Musk, I don't know how hard he had to push him, is penalizing South Africa for giving the indigenous people their land back. So what do you think about that, everybody? What do you think about that? And now White Afrikaners, they have opened the door to them to immigrate here. Now, mind you, while we are trying to shut the door on brown people who are indigenous to the Americas, they are from here. Black people who were brought over here to build the Americas. We're shutting the door on them, but White Afrikaners who feel that they have been wronged in South Africa are being allowed to come to the United States. What do you make of that? I want you to meet me on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social, santitajackson.bsky.social, or at Santita J on X. I'm still there. And guess what? I'm going to be on Truth Social in a minute because I want to know what everybody's saying firsthand. But right now, you can meet me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and on Santita Jackson and Friends, my Facebook page. For those of you who are poking me, please, please, please go to Santita Jackson and Friends. That is where I can speak with you. The headline of The Guardian goes like this: the White Afrikaners lining up to accept Trump's offer of asylum. Wow. And it goes on and on and on and on. Attorney Mark Fancher, it's always a joy to be with you, brilliant author and, of course, columnist, civil libertarian. But I'm going to start with Bill Fletcher, former president of Trans Africa. And, of course, we owe such a tremendous debt to you and to Randall Robinson and the whole team, the family at Trans Africa, of which we are all a part, for all that you did, not just to lobby for South Africa and breaking the yoke of apartheid, but for Africans throughout the diaspora. You have done so much significant work down through the years. We salute you today. Have to do that. But of course, you are the co-founder of Stand for Democracy, brilliant author. And I have to start with you because, as a producer, what I do is send out articles to frame a discussion. You don't need any of that because you are an Africanist par excellence. Help me to understand Elon Musk and this push that he and Peter Thiel and others are launching to bring white Afrikaners, to bring them to the United States. And how do you think that will impact the country? Bill Fletcher.
So, Santita, thank you. And I'm honored to be here. And I claim no credit for the work that Trans-Africa under Randall Robinson did before I took over the organization. It was him and a great team of people that did a phenomenal job. And praise goes to them. I was a grunt, a soldier on the ground during most of the anti-apartheid movement in the 80s. So a couple of things, Santita. So first of all, Afrikaners, let's be clear what we're talking about. Afrikaners are the descendants of the Dutch that went to what we now know as South Africa beginning in the 1600s. And they claimed that there was no one there, much as Europeans did when they invaded North America. And they started marching, and then they found themselves in confrontation with indigenous Africans there. They started setting up settler republics for the Afrikaners. They were known then as Boers, B-O-E-R-S, and then they came to be known as Afrikaners. The English invaded what we now know as South Africa, mainly on the west coast, around what we now know as Cape Town. And ultimately, there was a clash between English and the Boers, or the Afrikaners. The Afrikaners, after South Africa became independent, the Afrikaners in 1948 set up the apartheid state. And that codified all forms of colonial and racial oppression that had been going on. And it created a hierarchy, a racial hierarchy, a notion of which, Santita, will become very important when we talk about Trump and their vision for the future of the United States. So they set up a certain racial hierarchy with native blacks at the bottom, coloreds, South Asians, the Japanese as honorary whites, and then at the top were whites. Afrikaners and English South Africans, many migrated away from South Africa in the early days of apartheid because they opposed the system. But what Trump and Musk are talking about is something very different. And it goes to what you were saying. The Afrikaners have dominated control of the land in South Africa. And part of the revolution against apartheid was not simply to eliminate the system of apartheid, but was ultimately to get at a redistribution of the wealth and a redistribution of the land. Now, in both Zimbabwe and in South Africa, the move towards land redistribution started very slowly. For a variety of reasons we don't have time to get into, Mugabe in Zimbabwe started moving quickly in the 90s, early 2000s. But in South Africa, they've moved slowly. Part of what Musk and Trump are saying is that any effort at land redistribution is somehow in opposition to the rights of white people. So they're basically saying that, yes, it was too bad that the land was stolen, but tough. It was stolen, it's ours, and any effort to redistribute is a problem. That's what they're getting at. And so when Trump has said that the South African government is doing naughty things, first of all, there's no major push for land redistribution. There's some change in the law. They're not moving fast enough, in my opinion, but there's some change in the law. But that doesn't matter. For Trump and Musk, the whole notion of redistribution is problematic. So they're saying that Afrikaners are somehow being disenfranchised, and therefore, as opposed to everyone else who Trump wants to kick out of the United States, a special place should be set for the Afrikaners here. And this is completely consistent with what he has said in the past when he described, the global South and talked about S-hole nations, and also posing the question, Why aren't more people coming to the United States from Norway?
So when you see him making the case, and the media, the corporate media, are not making much of this at all. But I read a lot of international papers and the Guardian, and so I'm looking and saying, okay, they really don't even help you to understand that so many white South Africans are at the top of American power right now. I mean, much like
That's
what
right.
happened with Nazis, right, in the post-World War II era. I mean, my father has told the story, that's the Jackson family lore, that when my grandfather came back from the Second World War, they all got to New York and they took the train from New York to the depots, because that was a major mode of transportation 60, 70 years ago. And when they got to Washington, my grandfather had to move from the main car to the colored car, and then they moved the Nazi POWs to the main car. And then he had to even, insultingly, work for Nazis when he got back to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we're reliving this.
Yes, we are. I mean, the thing is, and it relates to something that you and I started talking about before the program. One of the mistakes that was made by the Black freedom movement and actually many other justice movements in the early 1970s was to think that we had won, and that the battle was over, that we had won the 64 Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, all kinds of other things, and all of which was true. But what we misunderstood is that there is no inevitability of victory. Mm-hmm. That victory has to be won and secured until you have decisively defeated your opponent. Decisively. We didn't. Mm-hmm. We won major victories, but we did not decisively defeat the other side. The other side understood that. Mm-hmm. And so for 50 years plus, they have been mounting a counterattack. Mm-hmm. And when we sit back and think, like Martin Luther King said in a very eloquent but wrong statement when he said, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. It was wrong. The arc of history is long. That's correct. It doesn't bend towards justice. It bends depending on who's pushing it. And so what we have now is a movement on the right which wants to overturn, I talk about overthrowing, but overturning everything that we've won since 1912. Everything that we've won. That's their vision. And so when people sit back and think, well, the pendulum is gone this way, but it will inevitably go, no, it won't inevitably go anyway. We're the ones that have to control where that pendulum goes. That's the problem. Too many of us are sitting back and just thinking, well, I don't really have to fight. It will work itself out. Trump will expose himself. It will all unravel. Well, it may unravel, but it will unravel the way a temple did on Samson.
Well, and I will say, with Dr. King, and, to fully disclose, my parents came out of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The book of Revelations tells us that God has already won. But the stories of the Bible tell you that you have to continue to fight. So, Absolutely. That's why when Dr. King was in Memphis, which is where my father and Reverend Bevel, for example, did not want him to go because it didn't feel right to them. They were making so much headway with the movement to get people to march on Washington again and to sit in on Washington, that it felt like a diversion. Although they were with the workers, the garbage workers, they said something doesn't feel right. And then they got there and you had the first violent act in Dr. King's march. It had never happened in his 13 years of ministry. And they said, you know what, we got to keep on getting to Washington, Doc. And he had these migraines because he knew that he was being pursued unto the point of death, mm-hmm. and knew that our government was after him. So he started twitching, Bill Fletcher and Mark Fancher, whenever he would hear firecrackers or hear some popping. Mm-hmm. He thought it was gunfire, particularly in the last year of his life. And Andrew Young tried to tell him, Martin, just because they would not leave him alone because they were so worried about him. Said, Martin, it's going to be all right. He said, don't say peace, peace when there is no peace, because the fight doesn't end. And I think, victory is certain, but the struggle continues. And that's the part that we missed, which is what, we've been talking about. That, you're right. We've been winning these massive battles and they've been great. But now they're bringing these Afrikaners into the United States. And we're not even aware of it, Bill Fletcher. I mean, it's like, and so when you bring it up, people are like, oh, yeah, that is bad. I'm like, an Afrikaner, you all,
Yeah.
you know who Afrikaners are. Yeah, I'm like, that doesn't make you uneasy with all of these, and they're at the top of the tech world. I mean, and what's interesting is what I did not know was that Peter Thiel, one of his top business partners, is a young Black man named Alex Karp, who's a multi-billionaire. Most of us don't even know that he exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just but it's getting more and more complex, but the struggle is here. I mean, where do you think this is going? Before I get to you, Mark, where do you think this is going to go? I mean, they are coming. I mean,
well,
what will that mean?
I'm not so much worried about Afrikaners coming here because there's not a whole lot, actually. I'm bothered by the significance of the ethnic cleansing of the United States that's underway.
Here.
Right? At the same time that they want to encourage a group of white people to be moving here. So
and you think those are happening
at the same time.
With each other.
It's all related.
Okay.
So this what they are talking about, the MAGA forces, they're using this term, Santita, remigration.
Yeah.
It's a term developed by European fascists recently, and it's been appropriated by the MAGA forces, and it basically means forcing people out. It's ethnic cleansing. So at the same time that they're saying, well, let's bring the Afrikaners here because they're being treated badly, wrong. They're saying we're going to drive all of these other people out, including U.S. citizens. And that is one of the reasons that the fight around the 14th Amendment becomes very important. Mm-hmm. The place that I would differ with you is this. It's a small difference. Mm-hmm. I am convinced we will win, but winning is not certain. Mm-hmm. And that we cannot ever let down our guard. We have to learn from what happened in the 1970s. We have to understand you have to continue to pursue the other side and not assume that the other side is going to accept willingly or politely their defeat. They have shown they're not. And so I think that it means that let's say one other thing. Mm-hmm. Their vision, and it goes back to the notion of apartheid, what MAGA is demonstrating, and I say MAGA, not just Trump, is that they have a vision of a racially reconstructed United States. So they recognize the demographics are changing. The percentage of white people in this country is declining. And so you get, by 2050, there will be no majority population. What MAGA wants is to create a hierarchy like in apartheid South Africa, where there is white supremacy, but then there are niches for other people. So they want to create a niche for South Asians. They want to create a niche for certain Latinos and Latinas, et cetera, et cetera. That's not a condemnation of those populations. Mm-hmm. They want to create a niche, and they want to try to get those populations to accept white supremacy, mm-hmm. with them having a particular role within that racial hierarchy. And that way, as a way of ensuring a continued domination in the society. That's the danger, that if people fall for this, mm-hmm. then we are in trouble.
Well, Reverend says slave masters never retire. never ever,
Right.
which is why
That's
the
right.
fight, it never ever ever stops. And I think the problem is when we think that things are guaranteed, right?
Correct.
And it's like, wait a minute, no. Even when you get something, relationships, you have to work on them constantly. They're constant negotiation, renegotiation, and somehow or another we got very comfortable, Bill
Hmm.
Fletcher. But I want Mark Fancher to respond to this, because I think that Bill Fletcher makes brilliant points. Number one, we have to keep fighting, 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 we have to keep fighting. And we also have to look at the fact that these people, they don't live from payday to Monday. They have 50-year plans. I mean, Brown v. Board of Education, they started working on undoing it on the day that the decision, well, actually, when the papers went in when the Supreme Court decided to hear it, they already knew. And quite frankly, when the Civil War ended, they instituted a counter to it. So talk to me. What do you make of this remigration, if you will? Thank you, Bill Fletcher. Because these people, they're the only ones who never illegally enter anywhere. they they see America, I'm sure, as their new homeland. So I just need help here.
Well, I think that's the key. And I think that everything that Brother Fletcher said is exactly correct. It's right on point. And the odd thing for many of us who are not white is that it also seems extremely absurd. And it's hard for us to appreciate and understand it. There's a saying, it's a black thing you wouldn't understand. I think that this is one of those things where it's a white thing. And if you're not white, you don't get it. Because we have to, from the way that we see it, it's much as if somebody staged a home invasion or broke into our home while we were away, and they lived for a month or so while we're touring the world in our house, sleeping in our bed, eating out of our refrigerator, dining at our table, and all of those things. And then we get back, and we say, you need to leave our house. And they say, but this is our house now. And then they get into our bed, and we say, get out of my bed. And they say, no, this is my bed. And so then we start resorting to physical means to get them out of the bed. And then they start crying and whining and saying, we're being mistreated. We're being taken out of our bed. This is horrible. That's the mindset of the Afrikaners that they've interviewed. I mean, they cast themselves as horrible victims, when in fact they were the invaders, the colonizers, the people who imposed apartheid and extreme, barbaric treatment and oppressive treatment on an entire nation of people for generations. And they're crying that they're victims. And this has been the mindset of white humanity around the world for as long as white supremacy has been used as a weapon and as a justification and as a rationale for the conquest of the lands of others, for the enslavement of entire populations, and for genocide. Because if you think about it, these kinds of acts, genocide, territorial theft, conquest, these are satanic kinds of activities. And most human beings do not like to think of themselves as being evil people. In order for them to do evil things, they have to persuade themselves that the evil things that they're doing are actually virtuous and holy. And so the doctrine of white supremacy has been developed for precisely that purpose. It rests upon an entire set of lies about the inherent inferiority of people of color and the inherent superiority of people who are white. And the fact that when people who are white go into another territory and take it over, that they're actually performing a great service for the indigenous population, because it's given that these people are savage, that they're pagan, that they're cannibals, that they don't know God, and that by going in, you're bringing them into closer association with civilization, that you are civilizing them, and that that's a virtuous thing to do. I mean, in fact, we mentioned this the other day upon the occasion of Pope Francis's death. that early on during the European expansion and as they began to conquer other lands, the legal justification for their territorial theft and conquest came from the Vatican, where the Pope would issue what were called papal bulls, which were presumably authorized by God, which were edicts that said that you are doing your Christian duty to go into these savage lands and to civilize these people. And that translated into enslaving them or killing them off, so that you could bring white civilization into that. So all of these things that we see now, the whole white nationalist orientation of the MAGA movement and everything else, is built upon that type of very long history, compounded by the early history of this particular country, where from the outset, even in the US Constitution, it is acknowledged that this is a country by and for white people, affirmed in the Dred Scott versus Sanford decision by the US Supreme Court, and affirmed again in Johnson versus McIntosh, with respect to the First Nations, the indigenous peoples. And that creates a set of expectations among the white population about what should be a racial hierarchy in this country. People who should be favored, people who should receive the benefits and the privileges of this country to the detriment of the others who were never supposed to be a part of this country in the first place. And so there is a widespread panic which has spread throughout white working class America like a virus gone mad, that somehow white people are endangered. That, as Brother Fletcher said a minute ago, that their population is declining and they're being outpaced by people of color, and that in order to deal with that, you have to deal with the border crisis, which has absolutely nothing to do with fear of crime or fear of people coming in who are not properly credentialed, but it has everything to do with the risk that poses of of North America becoming more brown than it has been in the past, of becoming more black. That's what it all boils down to, because if it were really a question of, or really a concern about declining resources and opportunities, then they wouldn't want white Afrikaners in here either. I mean, it's just a question of keeping people out, but that's not what it is. It's a question of keeping brown and black people out so that you can't have white people becoming a minority population in a country that in their minds they created, they built, and that they have maintained. And so, this whole thing is really an effort at white nationalism, and it's this Afrikaner business is one element of the broader white nationalist program, which is manifest in other ways, even to the point of Elon Musk himself. I mean, people kind of roll their eyes when they hear about how many children he has.
Oh my gosh.
But that's not just about, speculation, but I don't think that that's just about him, going around sowing wild oats and having a good time. I think that's about him engaging in making his personal contribution to preserving and expanding the white population by having
Oh,
as
he's a
many white
natalist.
children as he can.
He's a natalist. And we have the pro-natalist movement. We're seeing, as Bill Fletcher said, the language has migrated, if you will, over here. Now they're talking about what, a $5,000 tax credit?
Yeah,
If you have a child, now you know that's not for black people.
that's right.
Black people, particularly black people. That is for the white population. And everyone who I've seen comment on it is looking over at my monitors to the side. It's white people they're talking to. They're not talking to black people. We're the welfare queens. We're not supposed to get any money from the government, although we work so hard.
Yeah,
Um,
and if
it,
we wanted to induce a heart attack for any of these people, all that a bunch of brothers just have to show up at the White House and say, "Where are your women? We'll knock them up." And
oh,
they'll say,
wait a
"No,
minute.
no, that's not what we had in mind.
Let
That's
me
not what we had in mind at all."
let me push that button. He didn't mean that, Bill Fletcher. I'm sorry. Yes, he did. but 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 we're watching all of this. I think you're right. I mean, we have to look beyond them being here because you're saying to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the mindset's already here. The mindset of because Afrikaner mindset is a white supremacist mindset. That's why when you go to South Africa, you feel very much at home.
Mm-hmm.
But it's heartbreaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the first time my father was allowed in was 1979. And among the other things that he saw was that it would literally have been illegal for my family to live together, my immediate family. He said, I would have had to take you and Jesse and Jackie Jr. and live in one township, and your mother and Jonathan, maybe Yusuf, would have had to have lived in another. It's the mindset. I mean, because they codified the craziness that we've had to live with Bill Fletcher and Mark Fletcher. I mean, and when I see now in America, the whole biracial thing, I'm not, look, I get it. But I just know the one drop rule. I've said to people, hey, that worked to our advantage. Because wait a minute, we couldn't be tribalistic. We just knew that if you had one drop, you were in struggle. Thank you, Adam Clayton Powell. Thank you, Lena Horne. Thank you. So I mean, so where is this taking us, and what do you tell young people about this? I mean, do you think that they're understanding what is happening, Bill Fletcher?
Not entirely. I mean, it's a real mixed bag. I think that it's interesting what you were saying about the one drop rule, because it goes to this thing about the difference between apartheid and Jim Crow. So even though apartheid was to a great extent based on Jim Crow, it was the kind of so-called racial categories that the Afrikaners set up that was quite different than ours. So in the United States, there was no colored versus black population. You were black, and you might have been light-skinned, and we may have ourselves done weird stuff. In other words, like the brown bag test and stuff like that about getting into black clubs. But white America, seeing light-skinned African Americans, did not put the light-skinned African Americans in a separate category from other African Americans. Whereas in South Africa, they created that whole category of so-called coloreds, which most of that population rejected in the anti-apartheid struggle. I think that many younger people don't quite understand why we are in a situation that we're in. I think that there is a lot of cynicism and nihilism, this basic belief that it was all pointless. Why did we carry out these fights that we carried out? Many folks, I think, have been still stung by the philosophy, the almost philosophical construct of Reaganism, which attacked the notion of collective action and instead said, operate as individuals, be entrepreneurial, go for brand. And so you get people that think that to the extent that they're going to fight, they're going to do it on their own and not with others. And so we have to rebuild this notion that in order to win, we have to build a collective. There has to be a collective entity. It's not just individuals breaking through. It's that we have to join together and actually take on the system. And for many people, that's going to be a very difficult lesson for them to grasp, because for 40 years, if not more, what's been preached to us is do it on your own, get rich or die trying. Go for yourself, develop your brand, the hell with other people. And we have to overcome that in order to win.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, how do we do that? Because that's the zeitgeist. I mean, the spirit of the times is that, we don't, we hear me talk about this all the time, Mark Fancher. We don't get buckets of chicken anymore. We get individual meals. I mean, you don't have to do the chitlin circuit. I mean, like really grind out your craft. You don't have to find a little room in a place on Capitol Hill like Roberta Flack did, and you just play because you love the music. And then suddenly they had to build another room because so many people wanted to hear you. Or Aretha Franklin going to every church in the country from the time she was a little baby. I mean, now you get on TV, you sing a song, and that's it.
Right.
And we see someone become a black billionaire, and that's it. And or we see someone become president, senator, even in the lower house of Congress. In the lower house of Congress, yes, that's it, and that's not it. Bill Fletcher.
Agreed. So, Santita, let me give you an example of what I think we need to be doing right now. Part of the mission of the MAGA movement is erasure. They want to erase the history contributions of people of color. They want to erase because because what deeply rooted within MAGA is this notion that Mark was raising and I was raising, that there's a certain idea about this country is or should be a white republic, and that the rest of us should be subordinate. So all of the victories of the 20th century are in the face of this whole white supremacist ethos, and they are angry about it. There's a term that I borrowed from Europe, revanchism, the politics of revenge, the politics of resentment. And so you have a lot of white folks, and not just white working class people. I mean, in fact, more middle income and richer white people who are very resentful that the privileges that they experience vis-a-vis us have in many cases eroded, and they want those back. And part of that has to be tied to erasing the victories of people of color, the victories of women and other populations that have had to fight against oppression. Okay, so one front of this is the attack on the Smithsonian Institution. It's not just an attack on the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It's an attack on history. The attacks on DEI are not just an attack on Black folks. They're an attack on populations that have been marginalized. So we need, among other things, to build a counterattack right now. And we need to, one of those foci of the counterattack must be the Smithsonian Institution. We need to fight over the history of this country. We need to fight over the contributions. We should have buttons, bumper stickers, T-shirts all over saying, no erasure. We refuse to be erased. We refuse to have a new version of Birth of a Nation for the 21st century. We want something that we need to mobilize people. This is not going to be about developing a poem. This is not going to be about developing a song. It's not going to be someone kneeling down at a football game. Not putting anything down about that. It's going to necessitate masses of people in motion that are saying, we've had enough. We are not going to tolerate this. And the thing is, when we watch Trump, what's clear is that when you stand up to Trump, he will back down. When you insist, no, we're not going for this, he will back down. It's those that freeze up in the face of this that give him his strength. That's what we need to do, Santita.
But we also, and in furtherance of your point, we have to look at who he's putting in place, because we keep trying to depend upon a party, which is a mistake. He has put young people in place. His White House press secretary is 25, 26, 26. She's no more than 27.
That's right.
Almost everybody I saw marking the 100th day of his presidency today, they were all under 30.
Right.
With a few notable exceptions. We have a group of young white people who are very resentful. I bumped into one on the plane just a couple of weeks ago. And just for the culture, I had to get her straight. I'm trying to get off the plane because they say, you're not supposed to be separated from your bag. Well, I was
Right.
separated from my bag because I'm trying to get the bag on the plane and get a seat too. Oh, okay. So I'm trying to run to get my bag, and she immediately moves, opens up the overhead bin, and her bag almost falls on me. She says nothing.
Yeah, and
And as I moved past her, she then uttered some foolishness, and I just kept on going. But I waited for her at the top of the jetway. Yeah, I did. I did. I've never done that before
Hmm.
because I had to let her know. And then she was going to confront me. I said, "Darling, you really don't want to do this. You don't want any of this South Side. I promise you, you don't." I mean, and she was going to loud talk me because and she is not 30,
Right.
yeah,
not
see,
30. I'm like, whoa, but and it's not a shock. But it is where we are because they really do feel, Mark. I'm just finishing my point that this is my country, land that I love, and you don't belong here. Your work is done here. You built the country, now go. But you didn't really build it. Now they've given us a new mythology, which is immigrants built this place. They said that during one of the persons who was running against my brother when he first ran for Congress a couple of years ago, said that my mother bristled in her seat and she went and confronted the young lady, not in a mean way. She said, "Honey, let me tell you something." She said, "I'm almost 80 at the time she was." She said, "And I fought for you to get here. And I want you to know immigrants did not build this country. We did that."
Right.
She said, don't do that. I'm sorry, Mark.
yeah, see, I process this a little bit differently. I think that the white supremacy of the kind that we are witnessing is pathological, and it's almost as if you have someone who is an alcoholic and who knows that he's an alcoholic. He regrets that he's an alcoholic. He's attending, the steps programs. He's doing everything he can, but he just can't break the habit. He's just stuck there. And for someone like that, I'm going to really, really do what I can to try and encourage and help and all of that. Even as someone who's not trained to do it. But if there is someone who's an alcoholic and they are so sick that they know that they're alcoholics, but they like that they're trying to do everything they can to justify it and affirm it and in their mind convince themselves that this is a good way, this is a good lifestyle that they're doing, then they're beyond where the point where I can do anything for them. That requires a type of intervention and a type of assistance that I'm not capable of providing, or whatever I could do would not be able to get to a person like that. I think that's the nature of the white supremacy in this country. That I think that the white working class population that's part of MAGA is too far gone. I don't think that there is any possibility for them to respond in a good way to any efforts that communities of color might make to try and set them straight about who they are, who we are, and that kind of a thing. I think that the only way that they ever get to that point is when they themselves conclude that it is in their best interest to do that.
Of course.
And I think that the only way that they do that is when they perceive that their very survival depends upon them getting with a different type of a program when it comes to race. And because of that, personally, I think that the most productive thing that communities of color can do is to worry less about the perceptions of the white community and to focus exclusively on trying to establish power to a degree that it really becomes a question for the white community. They have so much power and so much leverage that unless we figure out how to get on board with them, unless we really understand them, then we lose completely, that we don't survive. I think that's what it's going to take.
So let me both agree and disagree with you, Mark. The MAGA movement as a movement, much like the Tea Party, was overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly middle income. It was not white poor people. And it wasn't really the white working class. And I think that the one of the problems, the way that the media characterized both movements, related more to the way people dressed when they went to demonstrations, and whether they went to college or not, as opposed to really what their class was. And so I just want to throw that in as one little piece. The other thing that
one thing though, so that I'm not misunderstood, and maybe I should have been clearer. I don't buy into the idea of middle class. I think that there are owners and there are workers. So I agree with you, but my term may be misleading. I think that if you're not a capitalist, owner, then you're a worker, and so
that's where we disagree. Okay, that's good to know, because I'm saying that there's a middle strata that is in there that is neither an owner nor a worker. Like for example, professional managerial groups, but also small contractors. But let's see that aside. That's another discussion we can have. But I think that where I would agree with you is that about 30% of the population are hardcore, pretty much fascists, and so they are. I call them zombies because they have lost their sense of humanity. They've lost their ability at empathy, and there's no point in trying to reach out to them. That's where I'm agreeing with you. But 70% of the country is not, even if we have disagreements, significant disagreements. And it's that 70% that we need to be operating in. And we, Black folks, because we are not the majority and will not be the majority in this country anytime soon, have to figure out how to build the right kind of alliances so we can gain the power that you're describing, and how we can subordinate that 30%. We do not need these zombies wandering around and doing the number. I saw one of the comments that was raised, Santita, when you were talking by someone who said, why did Biden let in all these immigrants? It's ridiculous. I mean, I would say to that person, where are your facts? Where are you getting that from? Right? I mean, where this notion that Biden was letting people in so that they could vote, what that is part of a fascist theory called the white replacement theory that is spread through Europe, North America, and in South Africa. And this idea that there's this cabal, and it's usually identified as Jews that are part of this cabal that are trying to bring in more people of color in order to subordinate whites. It's a ridiculous conspiracy theory with no foundation.
That was Lisa. I was looking for that. She said, why did Biden open the border to new voters to replace us? She asserted.
Right. There's no foundation for it. I would say, if you believe that, show us the facts, not alternative facts. Show us the facts. There are no facts that would substantiate that.
Well, the thing is, they signed, I keep telling everyone about the tent Partnership for Refugees that was signed by then Secretary of State Anthony Blinken to bring in workers. America was built on unpaid labor, and we still have a nasty habit of doing that.
That's right.
Now we just pay you just a little bit, but really we pay you nothing. That's what that's the globalist game, the Lima Proclamation from 1975. That's why Nixon went to China. They were globalizing. They were open. They were moving toward globalization then, eliminating workers. This has never. What did George Carlin say? It's a club and you ain't in it.
That's right.
just period. That's it. That's all. And one day, and the thing is, we also, Lisa was saying that in her neighborhood, it's a Black neighborhood, she sees a lot of Trump signs. I hear you. You're right. And I only have about 5 minutes or so left here, but I've got to have you all back because we need to talk about capitalism, because I think that's what we're looking at, the deconstruction, reconstruction of it right now.
That's right.
We need to get real. This is not just about eliminating government jobs. We're going into a whole new system of currency, living. It's a multipolar world. There's a lot going on here. And the country's been spending $2 trillion more than it's been taking in for years. So effectively, I think we're broke. But they can't say that because then all HE double hockey sticks will break loose. But heaven knows that's what it is. That's why they keep talking about martial law and all of that, because they know the secret's going to get out. Because you got a lot of folks when these checks are drying up right now, Bill Fletcher and Mark Fancher. And one of your cousins has been here, Bill Fletcher, and he wants you to reg. Your grandmother, Lucille, wait a minute, let me put that in. Two sisters, there you go. It's a whole line.
Okay, then it's an element in my family I wasn't aware of.
Well, then, hey,
All right.
you know how it goes, and he wanted to give you a shout out. So
All right, well, thank you.
I couldn't let this go. You know
Right.
that happens. I just got some letters from as is well, that's not just only in America. It just is where we are. I'm looking at what is it? What did my father? I just moved this. I see Reverend, and I got some of his white relatives from what is it from West Virginia. I said, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was, you keep on doing these things, you're going to see a whole lot of people because that's the way life works. I have about 3 or 4 minutes left. I'm going to give each of you 2 minutes. And I want you all to come back because I want you to talk about capitalism, workers, owners, middle class, no middle class. What does all of this mean? Because I think these are the questions that we're going to have to ask and answer in this moment. Because everything's being reorganized, everybody. Nothing, Dr. Max Wolf will be on with me very shortly, said that the world that we left pre-COVID is not the world to which we will return post-COVID. Everything has changed. Everything. Mark Fancher, your closing thoughts.
Well, I really believe that the white supremacy sickness is one that has a firmer hold on the entire white population than we imagine. I think even people who express some degree of openness and some desire for inclusivity and all of that, you really scratch them a little bit and you find out just how deep this white supremacy thing is. And so I really favor communities of color reaching beyond the borders of this country and establishing their alliances on a global basis with the global South and all of oppressed humanity throughout the world, and not limiting our struggle to just the confines of the United States. And the final thing I'll say is this, that I agree with both of you about the arc of the moral universe. I do think that victory is certain because I think that God has the ability to know what's ultimately going to happen. And the book of Revelation tells us what's going to happen, but that's a very bloody book with lots of hard struggle in it. The only thing is he knows that we have put up a fight. He knows that we've engaged in this struggle. And so that's what is before us. And we can't ever forget it. We can't relax and think that this is going to end well unless we engage in a fight and the fight for our lives.
Bill Fletcher Jr.
Yes, thank you again for inviting me. And I would say that in order to understand why many of those younger people that you identified, Santita, younger white people, have become entranced by MAGA. Not most, but many. You got to understand that the American dream has collapsed. And white people were told basically that if you worked hard, the lives of your children would be better than yours. And then beginning in the 1970s, that whole thing started to evaporate. And the living standards started to decline. And white people started looking around. And the question was, who was going to be blamed? Was it going to be the capitalist system, or was it going to be some scapegoated demographic? African Americans, Latinos, women, gays and lesbians, or whatever. And the MAGA forces have provided an answer that is easy and understandable for many whites, and it is equally wrong. And so part of what we have to do is take that on. if we intend to win. I think that what you're raising about the global part, I absolutely agree. That's the other piece. We're not fighting on this limited battlefield. We're fighting on a planetary scale. I think that victory, I don't think victory is inevitable, but I also believe that failure is not an option.
Amen. Failure is not an option. But the book of Revelations does tell me that victory God has already won. I heard Andrew Young say that. And at the end of our days, he wants to know if we were on his side. But you have to keep fighting. You
That's
cannot,
right.
and maybe because you think that you've already won. Maybe that's when you stop. Don't you know that's when Michael Jordan worked harder?
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute.
Correct.
I know. I look at my father in a wheelchair now, still pushing to get up out of that bed and go to work. And above his whisper, tell us things. Because we were raised understanding, Bill Fletcher and Mark Thatcher, that my father would not live long. And so he poured so much into us because his contemporaries didn't live past 39. So he said, I want you to be, he said, I will not have been a good parent for you, however long I can be with you, if you don't keep fighting. I want to raise some people who get up here and fight. Who's going to stand in defense of our people? I hope that will be you, in whatever way you choose to do it. And he wasn't just speaking to the five of us. It's all of us. We must stand in defense of this history, which has been tremendous. We have put up a fight. Now let's continue fighting, everybody. And know that the fight will never end, nor should it. You must take your lap around this track. Now, what are you going to do to contribute? Because Dr. King didn't fail. Sojourner Truth didn't fail. Fannie Lou Hamer didn't fail. Yes, Trans-Africa did not fail. Randall Robinson didn't fail. Max Robinson didn't fail. Now, what are we going to do? That's the point. What are we going to do? Fight. Much love to you, Bill Fletcher Jr., Mark Thatcher. Sending you all so much love. And you all have to come back to talk about capitalism. I can't wait.
Look forward to it.
Much love.
All right, take care.
AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. The economy is contracting, everybody. And now, should billions of tax dollars go to private religious charter schools? What do you think about that? Is this the ending of church, the separation of church and state? What do you think? Let's hop on over to the next hour and let's talk about it. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Back in just a moment.